Okay, is there anyone out there that can confirm if this is being broadcast or not? If you're there, let me know. Okay, hello everyone. This is kind of an impromptu card that I'm going to be working on, and I also wanted to test out the live streaming of this. I have no idea what I'm doing with this software sometimes, and I have to remember all the connections. I am living with a bunch of wires now, which is quite different from my previous or my regular videos here, so it's hard to remember all these different things. I have to test out software and all the connections and everything like that, so it's crazy. Anyways, welcome to the live stream, and if you want to watch this, I hope you enjoy it. But I've been playing around with a lot of the color box pigment ink effects on both the kind of the matted or the matte surface dark colored paper, but the thing that I've been trying this week is just the glossy coated paper with these different types of streaming fields of light, or crepuscular rays as they call them, and I'm just having a great time playing around with that. Yeah, does the audio have a lot of background noise? Sorry about that. I just unplugged my headphones, so hopefully that gets rid of some of the feedback here. Thanks so much for joining in. I'll plan to do a lot more of these live broadcasts here, but I want to do some live broadcasts where you guys can kind of direct what I do in these things too. But we'll see how it goes. But anyways, I thought I would play around a little bit with this Nature Set #1. I haven't used this in a while. I don't know. I used it a few months ago, but it was just sitting there, and I thought I'd check that out and base it around one of the quotes that I have, if I choose to add that in later. But I've been doing this thing with these ray stamp, these not ray stamps. I want to call it a stamp, but just with these masked crepuscular rays coming into my scene. And I want to try that kind of more where it's something kind of in the distant background, and you have this field of clouds, and you have some light rays in the distance. So I haven't tried that yet, but I'm finding that these rays and these kind of this grouping of whatever you want, I've just been using it around trees so far. It looks really great and dramatic in that kind of in that setting, but let's try it where it's kind of more in the distance, okay? When I first started doing these rays, if you haven't watched any of the latest videos or seen some of these scenes, I based it around these lighthouses where it just makes sense that you would see a real hard beam coming out of it like that, and I thought it looks, pretty nice and dramatic that way. But what I'm finding in these scenes like this, I think these rays like this look pretty good, but then when I started kind of doing this half kind of ray, it's more of like I forget what I call it, like a curtain of light like that, where it's hard on the top and kind of diffused on the bottom, or these half rays like this coming out. I thought that looked really good too, and I thought that something like that would kind of be more effective when we're looking at distant crepuscular rays coming out of some clouds. So total experiment here, and like I say in all these types of experiments, this isn't really an instructional video as much as it is me just kind of playing around and investigating these different types of techniques here. I'm going to keep this really simple like I have in some of these other recent videos, and not adding too much color into my actual impressions. I'll add some color over the top of the composition, but I'm not going to take too much time to, take this image. This is the country stream here, and what I would do is, if I wanted a lot of color in it, I would just color this whole thing some dark color, and what I do is I go back in and I add in some additional greens or variations of green values or something like that. into the actual stamp so that the impression inherently has all those colors. But I don't want to take the time to do that because I just want to experiment with these more distant rays. And, you know, those rays kind of become the subject of the scene itself. Vicky, I have drawn all of the stamps myself. Sorry if the audio isn't very good for you. I don't know. Is the audio bad on everyone's device that you're using? I could try to turn it up if that's the problem, or if I'm getting a lot of feedback. One of the things with these live feeds too is it kind of sounds. There's a lot of kind of a static or like a hiss to it a little bit, I'm noticing. Now, one of the things for sure, like I can hear my computer fan going right now, so I bet it's probably picking up some of that. I don't know. I guess with the live streaming software, my computer has to work extra hard, so I don't know. One thing that I might do in the future is I'll kind of move my computer away. So I'm kind of trying to fine-tune this live stream process here. But yeah, I'm basically what I started off as, really going back to high school, is I was doing a lot of pen and ink work, so I used a lot of technical pens, and that lends itself well to doing line art, they call it. It's where you have black and white imagery, and it's all black and white. There's no gray tones or anything like that. So when I started working for a stamp the hand company, another stamp company, while I was in school, I started drawing some designs for them. And I didn't start with them as a designer or anything like that, but I don't know, just somewhere along the line, they found out that I drew. So one of the times around their design submission period of time, which happened about 2 or 3 times a year, they just asked if anyone felt like submitting something, and I submitted a couple designs, and it, you know, kind of went from there. Anyway, yeah, I'll try to figure out this sound thing in the future, but I have a feeling that my fan and my computer sitting right next to my desk is kind of, you know, adding to that kind of background fuzz. I didn't even think about that the first couple times I did these live tests. So anyways, yeah, that's, I always liked doing black and white artwork. I love pen and ink artwork, and I also like nature, so kind of that goes hand in hand exactly with Stampscapes here. But I don't know, you know, Stampscapes is kind of a foundation for all of you that, you know, that do stamping, so I consider the artwork to be the things that you guys do with the imagery. These are just the tools as I see them. And I just happen to stamp myself. Not all people, not all designers or, you know, stamp companies use their stamps. They have other people that do that, but I don't know, it's very convenient for me to really enjoy doing both aspects of it, and I think it kind of goes hand in hand. I think it makes me a better designer using the stamps myself, and I get a lot of ideas on what I want to design. As I stamp these things out, I'll stamp something out and I'll think, oh, I need this or that, you know. Okay, so I'm just kind of creating a foundation here. This is the way I always started off my workshops. I always had people kind of start off with their main imagery, and then what we do is we just kind of fill in around it. And if they were in a beginning class, one of the things that I really had to get everyone kind of used to was overlapping things and not trying to go for kind of more of this kind of puzzle piece where we're stamping things edge to edge like that, you know. So that was one of the biggest things that you have to, you know, if you're instructing a class in scenic stamping, is kind of getting people past the idea of having to do super careful placement. I am working on some new designs right now, Lori. One of them is a winter kind of lakeside cabin scene, and it's kind of shot, I don't know, I say shooting, not photography, but it's kind of angled from above like you're looking down at it. And I have this little kind of pier going out into the water, so, when we're doing these scenes like this, inevitably, I think what we're doing is we're kind of, and I don't know, you guys can see if you agree with me on this, but when we're doing these scenes like this, and then we're, I don't know, kind of working on them more and more, I think that we tend to try to create settings or scenes where, places that we would like to be, So I think, something like a little lakeside cabin, in the snow, alongside a lake. I don't know, that sounds to me like a really nice place to be or visit. So that's the type of thing that I'd like to stamp out. And it's one of those things where you can maybe color in the windows or something like that with a little white gel pen to make it look like it's at night and the light is coming from inside, a nice cozy little cottage type of thing. Okay, so country stream, a couple surrounding trees. Okay, now let's do something for the sky, and I want to do a cloud up here. I can do it, I don't know, maybe we can do it from, I was thinking about just doing it directly overhead, but we can also have this cloud at a bit of an angle, like so, with the beams of light coming this way. I don't know, for some reason I tend to put things on the left side if I do, kind of going from left to right, or like that. This, yeah, Lori, I was going to do a Halloween card on this live broadcast. I felt like doing that on the darker paper or something like that, and I don't know, maybe I'll get around to something like that. But yeah, definitely some holiday or seasonal types of cards for some upcoming videos. Or you asked, what am I planning? Well, when I think of Christmas, I don't have too many designs like, I don't have anything like snowman, although that's another design that I want to do in the future. But, I don't have like a Santa Claus or something like that, or a Christmas tree. Although we have done Christmas types of scenes where we stamped out like a tree like this, and then we've positioned things like, I don't know, what do you call them, those little crystals, little colored crystals, like they look like ornaments on here, or metallic things like, where we're decorating a Christmas tree or something like that. But what I do is I tend to go for more of the, like a seasonal type of thing, like a winter type of card. So that tends to be more of my holiday types of cards. They're more seasons, oriented. And Halloween, I mean, we need some type of, you need pumpkins or something like that, I mean, you can do fall types of color schemes and whatnot, but, oh, I don't know, I have a bunch of things like bats and things, and other pumpkins that I drew for a stamp in the hand, and maybe I'll use some of that. Vicky, you can you can check out the website for more information on places that sell the stamps, or if you don't have any local places or whatnot, you can order the stamps online. I don't tend to get into clear stamps. Clear stamps are really great for compositional purposes, but clear stamps, the very nature of the chemistry of them, they're really cheap to produce, but they don't last as long as 100% red rubber. Clear stamps also don't take the ink quite as well as 100% rubber. In fact, one time, I know this one company that switched all of their stamps over to clear, And a few months later, it was all back to rubber again. And I asked the owner of that company, I said, hey, why did you do that? You know, because I was thinking that must have cost a fortune. And the owner, which is a very famous rubber stamper, if you've been stamping for any length of time, I won't say her name, but she told me, she goes, Kevin, I just could not get a clear impression from it. And it's great. Clear stamps are really great if you don't have a lot of surface area. If they're outlines, it doesn't really matter too much, but where you have a lot of bold types of imagery like that, sometimes it can kind of puddle up in here. Sometimes it works with certain types of inks, and sometimes it's a little bit more, I don't know, picky in terms of the types of inks that you use with those. So I don't know, in terms of longevity and things like that. It doesn't mean that I'll never do that. If like some company wants to do some kind of set, you know, in clear, using our images, I think I'd be open to listening to some of that. But just in general, I tend to go for what I feel is a more kind of longer lasting type of material for the stamps, you know. I want my stamps lasting a really long time, okay? Now, I don't know, maybe not all of us, we don't need our stamps to be, you know, I think I've seen a lot of awesome clear stamps out there. I'm not saying anything bad about them, but that's just the fact of that. But there are some cool stamps out there in clear, and like I said, for positioning purposes, and maybe you don't need, you know, your stamps to last 20 years or something like that, then that's fine, you know. I don't know, but I don't know. Unless there's been kind of some new developments, you know, which I hope there have been, but some stamp companies have asked me before, you know, trying to get me to utilize them as far as manufacturing goes, but they couldn't really answer me as far as if the chemistry has changed in the last 10 years or so, because I knew some companies that went with that early on, and it just, what happens is it starts resisting the ink a little bit because that polymer, it hardens over time, or it can harden over time. I don't know, maybe it has to do with also kind of the storage that you would do and how you clean it off and things like that, and maybe some of the inks that are used with it. So anyways, that's my take on it. I don't know, you know, we're here in this kind of open form. You can, you know, has anyone had any clear stamps that are, you know, not working as well anymore? Maybe it's not, you know, maybe that was with certain companies too, I don't know. Okay, what I'm doing now is I'm coming into this. Now this is where these pigment ink light beams are really awesome, okay? Now before, I would have typically been leaving some areas light to create a beam of light, but now I don't have to do that anymore, which makes this process a lot easier. But here's what I'm doing. And this is a little bit of a different process than what I would typically do. You know, a lot of times I do kind of some areas of light in my sky, and I leave some area of light down below. Now I'll kind of do that this time again, all right? And, oh, by the way, this is a Memento London Fog. It's a gray ink. But because these beams of light are so kind of apparent and somewhat striking in terms of a visual, I will go a little bit more kind of filled in as far as my tones go, okay? Because I want these beams of light to show up in terms of them being like an actual shape within the scene. Before it was kind of more implied, here's light up above and here's light reflected down below, but on this one, or in this type of setting, I want it to show up more, okay? So, one of the things about putting white onto a darker card is the darker the background is, the lighter those white beams will appear by contrast, if that makes sense. Okay, filling in here. Now see what I've done here. Here's the trick that I do too. Now one of the things that people often mention as far as lighting goes, okay? This happened to me all the time. I'd be at a convention or something like that, and people, you know, when they get home, they get into the swing of doing color additions, or it might have been someone that was in a workshop before. And I often heard comments, you know, they have everything else down, but the thing that they don't have down quite the way they want it to be was lighting, okay? Now here's a really, really simple lighting kind of scheme that you can do. The only difference, everyone that says that they have kind of a, well, I don't know about everyone, but I would think that 90% of what I've seen in lighting has to do with someone just simply not leaving a couple areas of light or the white of the paper in some area, okay? Now this is just one color that I've laid down here, and I'm going to lay down other colors over the top of it. But when I do that, I'm going to retain like that little area of light, okay? And if you simply leave some areas of light, and it doesn't matter where it is, on the surface or on your landscape somewhere, it could be water, it could be on the top of a roof of a cabin. In this case, it happens to be in the water here. I've left a little bit of the lightness on top of that ridge right there. Okay, that's all. That's how I do lighting right there, and it isn't anything harder than that. But here's the thing: when you start adding in more tones, you just have to retain those areas there. Don't go over them. Okay, or some people might be thinking, well, that's green. Okay, because that's grass. Okay. So what they'll do is they'll add in lots of greens over there, and they'll color that white green, okay? But all of a sudden you've made that area that's white dark, and suddenly you've lost the lighting down here, okay? So just leave a couple areas light. That's really all there is, at least in terms of my process. Yeah, absolutely, Lori. I'm always open to ideas on videos, so it could be a specific scene, stamp, or, I don't know, concept. And if I can do it, I'll do it. What do you have in mind? And don't say you want to see a video using every stamp in the line in one zine. Although I'm trying to get to, eventually, the thing that I'm trying to do on my videos is I would like to have a video where I've utilized every single stamp, you know, has been represented in some video over the course of time. Now, I'm not talking about, you know, like the little filler things like people, you know, if I stamp one canoe in there, you know, another one can be, you know, stamped in there as well, you know. But things like the main imagery or main types of images, you know, like clouds and things like that, I want to have all of those different types of things represented in the video so I can always reference back. Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm always open to new video ideas, but that's one of the big things there, though. I don't know. On a lot of my videos, I'm just walking into my room here, and I literally, on my way over to my desk, I'll look at my stamps and I'll say, okay, I'm going to stamp out that. But I really had no concept coming into, you know, my stamping room here. Desert scenes and plants, okay. Arid types of imagery, that's a good one. That's another theme, whole theme that I wanted to do at some point in time too, is kind of the more, you know, southwestern types of imagery. I can do that too. One of the things that changes, you can use a lot of the same foundations of scenes, okay, as long as it doesn't have like foliage on it, like these pine trees right here. I mean, you know, you can go up into higher elevations, like in Utah or Arizona or whatever, you know, and see this type of imagery. But if you want kind of more of the, you know, saguaro, you know, the desert shrubbery and flora or something like that, you know, that's the thing that changes a setting. So I can use like a waterfall, but if you use, you know, you can do a red rock type of thing, you know, around it, or, you know, I don't know, what else, you know, like a Havasupai Falls with that red rock kind of a, you know, canyon, you know, narrows type of area, and you can do like turquoise waters or something like that, and suddenly you've taken that waterfall out of a, you know, pine forested area, and you've placed it into, you know, desert southwest type of setting. Or I could put, you know, a waterfall, and I can put tropical types of things around it, like, you know, palm trees and ferns and things like that, and suddenly we're on, you know, Oahu or something like that, you know, or, you know, Tahiti or something like that in some kind of rainforest situation. So that's the one thing that changes, you know, in terms of settings, you know, it's the fauna, or the flora, sorry. Let's see. Okay, now here's what I'm doing now. Now, as you can see, the darker I get, I'm retaining this area of light down here. And suddenly we have a lighting scheme, you know. And it's really no more complicated than that, at least in terms of the way I approach light, okay? And the way that I approach color, too, that's another comment that I've had a lot of times, too. That someone will say, well, you know, they're not good with color or something like that. I've heard those exact words many times, and a lot of times they don't believe me when I tell them. I don't know. I think I stopped telling people this because they just don't believe me, but I'm not really great with color, okay? Now, the way that I approach color, okay, and we can see what we've done here is I just started from, I don't know, that gray might be darker than that blue there, but for the most part, this is just a light, you know, these are two light tones, and then I'm working darker. Okay, now I can add another, you know, darker tone here. You can mix and match pads or something like that, but, you know, for me, color, I'm really not thinking too much. I'm not thinking of these triadic color schemes, you know, off my color wheel, and analogous color, all of those different types of things, you know, to create these kind of harmonies and whatnot. For the most part, I'm just working from a light color into darker versions of itself, and that's easy to kind of pull out, you know. All I have to do is, I don't have to know anything about it, all I have to do is look at it, and we have light, medium, dark, and that's how I build my color schemes, okay? And it's really, that's, you know, that's my color kind of theory, and my lighting theory is just leave more than one area light. I mean, people could. You could just leave that whole entire area in there light, and it could be dark all the way around it. But I think having kind of this break right here in between my two light sources, my light source and my reflected light, I think that makes for a kind of a stronger dialogue in here. And I have another video up, I think it's called Easy Lighting Schemes or something like that, and you can see this lighting convention in, I don't know, it must be 90% of my scenes. You'll see some area light up in the top, and then some area light down below, and then there's just some color in between, and it's really nothing more than that. Okay, kind of adding in here. You know, the way this is going right here, I can still add greens down here, and this still could be this grassy area, because blue, naturally, is a component of green. I would just add some green tones to it, and it would become kind of a turquoise, and you can add a warmer green to it, and it'll become a brighter green, okay? But, I don't know, we were talking about kind of a seasonal types of things. And why don't I make this into kind of more of a seasonal type of scene and just go, we'll just do it in blue tones and just make this snow, okay? And I think I can have fun with some of the areas down here, and we'll kind of create a patchy snow type of thing down below here, okay? So I'm going on with this darker blue now, and again, I'm just being careful not to tone out all of my light areas right here. Okay, now the darker colors, I tend to focus those around on the perimeter, okay, more. But if I do come in here, see, when I do start coming into this area in the middle, it's more, you can see how much tone is on here. I mean, there's barely any, okay? So it's a much drier version of, you know, this pad, you know, immediately after I ink it, okay? So there's a lot of control over it. It's not a precarious type of exercise doing that. And you won't get any of these types of things, so that's not the motion you want to use with your, you know, your applicators. You want to kind of, you know, stay in a little bit of a denser area like that, okay? Where it kind of spreads out, and that's what I'm doing over the top of that. But again, now this is glossy cardstock, but again, if I do kind of a bad application of it and just kind of smear it in there like that, it'll spread right out for you. And this is a glossy cardstock, okay? It's not glossy photo paper that you would use in like an inkjet printer or something like that. Those ones grab the ink a lot faster than this cardstock. This cardstock has a clay surface to it, and over the clay surface it is clear coated, okay? There's matte coated papers as well, okay? Now you can use those, but the feeling, and you can use this technique on it, but the feeling is going to be different. And I've actually done this process on photo paper as well, and it's a lot different. It's a little bit more precarious. You have to kind of build up your tones a little bit longer, use a lighter touch, because it's going to be really grabbing at that ink, and it's going to soak into the paper. I'm guessing it's because, you know, on a home inkjet printer, you want those inks to dry fairly quick. You don't want it to come out of there and you just be able to go like this and it rub off all the ink, right? Okay, so I'm going a little bit darker and darker here, and I'm keeping in mind those light rays in there, those light beams that'll be applied. So I'll be curious to see what those look like. I've never done this type of look before, okay? So we'll find out, you know, what it looks like together, and I'll try to figure out some things as I go. Inevitably, when you're kind of playing around with some new technique or look or mark on the paper, you're going to be coming up with some things that you didn't really expect, which is kind of the fun aspect of it too. But, you know, in terms of developing something, you know, it's there's always a question as to what it will look like. Okay, this is black, okay? Now, a lot of times I finish off my scenes in black ink, if that is the color that I stamped out my main imagery with, okay? It tends to bring everything together a little bit more. Now, in a scene like this, too, one of the options could have been, because I wasn't planning on just going all blue in this scene, but one of the things that you can do, too, which is quite interesting, is you can stamp out your imagery in a dark blue ink. And what that'll do is it'll look like it's kind of pushed into the distance a little bit, okay? It recedes, like maybe this image right here in the middle, my country stream, could have been stamped out in like a dark blue, like a dark navy blue. And that would have made it look like it was farther back in the distance, and then I could have saved my black for my trees right here, so that, you know, there's this little bit of a value kind of scale distance convention working in there. And that was the thing that I used to do in my Stampscaping 201, I think that's what that class was called. It was the kind of the follow-up to the beginning class. We would use value to create distance between our layers of imagery. Okay, now everything really is on the same layer because we're working on a two-dimensional piece of paper, right? But it would look more, the space would look deeper by going with a lighter tones for background, you know, depth, I guess you can say. Okay, so this is black here. I'm going fairly dark because I want those light beams to really stand out in here. I don't know, we could make it more subtle too, and I think that would look fine as well. Okay. Talk about seasonal things. I need some ice skaters or something like that down here, don't I? Wouldn't that be great? Right here, in this area. Anyways, I don't have them. Okay, let me see here. Okay, let's create some light beams, and I'm trying to decide right now if I want some of those beams to be kind of shining down into this landscape. I think that maybe or do I want those beams to be kind of more in back of those trees? I don't know. I think it might be kind of interesting to have these some light beams coming maybe down into the landscape a little bit, not just in the distance behind those trees. But I don't know. Let's just start it and find out here. Okay. All right. Here's the key to this entire process right here. I'm going with a color box frost white, and it's this. I have two pads right here. I think I must have re-inked this one because this one is super, super juicy with ink, okay? This one's not good for that process. I mean, I could use that. I just would apply less ink to my applicator, okay? I'm going to use a color box stylus tool here. And because my pad is fairly dry with ink, it is not going to be a precarious process of laying it down here, okay? We don't want to go like this and have this big slathering of ink, okay? And pigment inks are almost like paint, right? So I don't want this kind of big slathering of white paint in this process. So, okay, so that being said, if you have a fairly new pigment ink pad, just lightly, show what I'm doing here, just lightly dab it, okay? And then what you might do after that is you might blot it off a little bit, okay? And then that's all you need to do, you know, if you're working with a juicier pad here. All right, now here's what I don't know what I'm doing, okay? Because I've only been, well, I don't know. I've only been doing this for a couple scenes, and I haven't done one where this kind of represents kind of light beams in the distance like this. I don't know, it shouldn't be hard. But let's kind of figure out a place for these light beams will be coming out from, okay? Let's say, now see, this is very convenient here because I've left an area of pure light, okay? So it makes sense that the light would probably be coming out of this area right over here. So I think I'll create these light beams coming out from kind of about this distance right here. I'm not going to have it coming out from right underneath there, which I think would look okay, but I think it'd be better if I have it coming from kind of the middle of this, so it'll be coming in front of some of those clouds, okay? Down like that. All right. So let's see here. Let me tell you, I'm going to do, this is what I was doing on all my beams before, like that, okay? And that creates a very defined beam, okay? Like that, right? If I just tone in all that ink. But if I leave it off like this, I find that that kind of created a softer look to it. Now, I kind of like both, but I think for this purpose, I'm going to go with this half sheet, or I don't know, one sheet of paper I meant. And it kind of creates this curtain of light, okay? Now what I'm doing is I'm kind of toning in, I'm mostly toning in right on the edge of this piece of paper. I'm probably doing something like this. This is the applicator right here. I probably have most of it like that, okay? Where I'm only using just a very small portion of it, okay? And I'm giving it a stronger kind of amount next to this piece of paper. And then what I'll do is I'll kind of feather it out a little bit, like that, okay? And hopefully it looks a little bit more open, okay, like that. See that beam? It looks weird, doesn't it? Just like independent from any other beams here. Okay. Oh gosh, you know what I was thinking? If anyone has like some like a buildings of any cityscape or anything like that, you can do you can do that skyline and then have a beam of light going up into the sky doing the bat signal. I don't know what would be used for a bat. You might have to draw it in or something like that, but wouldn't that be fun? That would be, I don't know, that would be kind of an interesting take on a Halloween card even, you know, because it's bats. But something like that would be kind of interesting in this. I haven't done beams coming, you know, going up yet. I think I've always had it coming down, but I don't know, going up would be interesting too. Okay, now here's this thing too. What I've found early on is I'm thinking that these light beams might be more interesting if they're kind of a little bit irregular, like there was some light, more light and ink on one area, and then on another area you kind of oscillate it a little bit. And I think that looks pretty good like that. All right. Let's do like something like this. The hardest thing to decide is kind of where you want the beams to be. I mean, you know, but it's a good thing because just about anywhere you put it, I'm finding it looks pretty good. I don't know if I've added in any that I don't like. I think I've dabbed off a little bit of ink in a couple spots in my previous cards where I thought, it's a little bit too bright, but the beauty of the color box pigment ink is that it allows you to, like right now, if I didn't like that beam right there, I can take a paper towel and just, you know, wipe that right off and it'll come off. And even if it dries, I can take and I can rub it right off. It comes off easier even when it dries. So that being said, if you really like your beams, what you would do is you just spray seal it, okay? And then, you know, they're not going to be subject to, you know, damage or getting rubbed off. All right, so just in general, I'm kind of aiming, I don't know, these all kind of have, you know, kind of a similar vanishing point right here. So just kind of decide where you want that kind of vanishing point to be, and it doesn't have to be exact or anything like that, but I think it kind of makes sense to do it that way. Okay, now we have this illuminated area down here. So maybe I'll have some beam of light kind of shining down on that area. And then I'll do a few. Oops. Now I added way too much ink right there, so I'm just wiping it off a little bit. Oftentimes with my white pigment ink applications, I always tell people I probably, in the end result, I remove more ink than I really apply. In other words, I add some down, but a lot of times inevitably I end up kind of wiping a lot of it off. So, you know, it's kind of you know, trial and error. And oftentimes I just rub it off where it just stands out too much, you know. Okay. Does anyone here still do a bunch of holiday cards, Christmas cards, or whatever? I think I was mentioning in another video, I knew people that sometimes, people that were super organized, they're like done in July, you know, which is kind of smart. If they have more time then to do it than, you know, in the holidays when things start getting really busy. Okay. I think we can stand to go with another one out here. Maybe I'll go with a really, really pale version. The thing that kind of gets me doing this is that when I start adding this in, I can't tell if it's been added down, anything's been added, but then when I pull my paper away, it's, oh gosh, yeah, it, you know, it really does show up well there. All right, but see that? I mean, that really changes the spirit of the scene, in my opinion, a great deal. And I mean, this is a really easy, like, well, I would say it's a super easy kind of a technique here, which is what I like. I like easy and effective, you know. Those two kind of words are really, those are not bad things for stamping, scenes, crafting, whatever. So there's a stronger beam coming down there in that light. It'd be interesting to have a streak of light. Let's try something here. Let's have that streak of light coming over this way. Or do I want to? Let's try something here. Let's extend this. Oh, here's one thing that I found too, just early on, okay? When you apply this ink like this, sometimes it dries darker than it looks when you first put it on, okay? So sometimes you kind of have to wait for it to dry and set up, okay? I think that looks okay coming out that way, I don't know. Okay, if I'm going to do that, I'm going to do it right here too. So it's kind of a lone beam, right? Well, I'll tell you what, let's add just another one, okay? But anyways, what I was getting at was it might dry darker, okay? Now, if you wanted your beams to be more visible and apparent, what you can do, and this is really easy to do, you can just go right back over. Let's say this thing dried overnight, okay? And I wanted it to be, some of these beams to be lighter, okay? All you have to do is just go back over it again like this, and maybe what you do is you just start lightening up certain areas of a certain beam, okay, again. Or, here's another thing you can do. We don't always have to just go with one brand of ink, okay? Now this Colorbox Frost White is known for being kind of a slower drying and translucent, meaning you can see the background showing through ink, okay? Now there are some white ink pads, and I've heard the Hero Arts, what is that one called? It's like a name of an animal. Is it unicorn, I think? Unicorn? Is that right? I think the unicorn one, I think it might be more opaque. Okay, so let's say this beam right here, it's all kind of a uniform consistency, okay, coming across here. But wouldn't it be kind of interesting to have it more opaque up here, meaning whiter, and then as it comes down here, it kind of breaks up. So why not go for maybe 2 tones? And a lot of you probably have more than one, you know, brand of pad. I happen to have one. But I just found out about that unicorn one recently. So I haven't bought it yet. It's sitting in my shopping cart online, but I need to pick one of those up so I can give kind of a multi-toned look to these types of effects. Okay, now I'm adding a little bit more pigment ink around these beams right here. And I'm having a lot of fun doing this type of thing, but that that is a really easy thing that you can do to a scene, you know. I mean, I think the scene looked fine without it, but I don't know. It looks, there's a kind of a dynamic element that comes into play when you do something like this, where you have some sort of element running across your different imagery, and in this case, going from the background to foreground like that. It really leads the viewer's eye into the scene, okay? And like I said, there's a lot of other applications of this type of thing that we can still be doing. We can be doing it around other types of subject matter. You know, if there's a Christmas card, like an angel or something like that, or word stamps, you can have it coming from behind word stamps and whatnot. I don't know. It's just really fun to do that type of, to add that type of element. Okay. This is a word stamp that says, "Heaven is under our feet as well as over our heads." And I'm not sure if I'm going to add that in. I was thinking about adding something like that in the white ink over a darker background, but I kind of kept this fairly light. I think if I was to do this, I would kind of stamp it on a different piece of paper and kind of mat it, and then put it over the top of that. And I think that would be kind of a nice word stamp for that. But in this live broadcast, I don't want to take the time to start cutting out a bunch of paper and things like that. Okay, so we have this laid down right here, and I tell you what, you know, this might be kind of interesting here, where we're talking about layers of imagery. Okay, now we have this tree right here, and it's in front of these beams, right? Now this beam right here comes in front of this tree right here, right? Let's play around with some depth here and take that layering of imagery and depth one step further, okay? I'm going to take that same tree stamp again, okay? I'm not going to stamp the bottom of it, so this thing can kind of hang off right here, okay? And let's stamp this out in, let's go with a VersaFine black, okay? I love the VersaFines for their super, super dark impressions that they tend to leave. It's, for those that don't know, it's instant dry pigment ink, and I'm guessing they call it VersaFine. I didn't even know this. This is a fast-drying oil-based pigment ink. So the drying time, it says, does depend on the paper. So stamping it on glossy paper, it takes a long time to dry. Now you can heat set it and everything like that. But one other thing about the VersaFine, and I'm guessing they call it that because it keeps a really detailed impression, and a lot of my stamps are very, very detailed. But the VersaFine, My pad is fairly wet and juicy, but I find that it really keeps the detail and it doesn't puddle up in the details, which I guess is why they call it VersaFine, but I don't know. Okay. Hopefully this gets a nice stark black impression, okay? Yeah, look at that. It's even darker than the Marvy black used, isn't it? But look at that, what that did to those rays. Now you have depth in the rays that's going in front of a tree, but in back of another one, okay? Now this looks lopsided because we have this super dark tree over here and this lighter version over here. Now I consider that Marvy black to be pretty black, but I'm telling you, next to the VersaFine, we get, I don't know, we have really true black here, okay? Which is fantastic for foreground imagery because while this is a two-dimensional surface, it really looks, you know, a little bit more three-dimensional this way in terms of the depth that, you know, we're achieving from multiple values here, okay? Okay, so here we go. See what I did? And that is really fun to apply. So suddenly, right here in the foreground, amongst 3 trees stamped in black, the closest things to you, you can create depth within that given space there just by changing your black pans that you've used for those areas right there. So it's a simple little trick to do to create that extra layer for yourself, okay? A Memories black would look really fantastic too, as well as that VersaFine there. Okay, checking to make sure this is still streaming. Okay, now we have that. Okay, now this is my Uniball Signo pen. Okay, and what I'm going to do, we'll create kind of a little bit of a snowier look, or even if it's not like completely covered in snow down there or something of that sort, I'll create kind of a little bit more of a, I don't know, frosty look over some of these images, okay? Or some of these areas, I guess you can say. One of the things that I found out recently was that I didn't know there were various kind of translucencies of, or opacities of white ink. I was watching this video by Jet Pens, and they were talking about the different types of pens they have. One was a little bit more translucent, and one of them was more opaque, and kind of different usages for both of those. Okay. See, I'm kind of adding this little patchy snow type of effect down here and putting it up on this little ridge line right there. And if we want to, we can kind of create a little bit of a kind of a first snow type of thing here in these branches as well. I also like working with the bleed-proof white, okay. you know? I'm not going to put too much of this white paint over here, though. This is too dark over here, okay? But on the interior here, where these branches are closer to the light, I think it's fine to do, okay? Thanks, Lori. Always fun stamping here. Especially when it's something that I haven't done before, okay? It's really fun to sit down and over the course of, I don't know, whatever it is, half an hour, whenever you're doing something, to see something develop in front of your eyes that you haven't seen before. That's why I try not to stamp out the, the same composition too many, multiple times. Although, if anyone's on my mailing list, one of the things that I mentioned was these light rays like this. Adding that type of thing element to these scenes, it really makes me want to go back and revisit a lot of compositions that I've done over the, oops, look at that right there. See that fingerprint? This ink right here is super wet, so I probably picked up some ink somewhere on my finger. But one of the things in jet pens, what they say these are really good for is you can kind of correct something. Yeah, you can use it as like a correctional pen. I don't know. I'll add some kind of little effects down here. I'll add some other streaks in there where this doesn't look so crazy, but anyway, scumbling they call that right there, which when you kind of add some little marks over something. But let's see, on some of these areas down here where there is that light beam, I'll add a few little more highlights in those areas. Although that beam might be several miles back, I'll still put some highlights over some of these trees. Or tree parts that are kind of, might have a little bit of a reflection in it from that cast light there. Okay, but anyways, what I was getting at was these beams are really a dynamic element for a scene. I've always loved the look of pigment ink, but having the ability to weave these beams of light in between objects. I didn't really do it too much in this one. I put it behind this tree and in front of everything else. But I think on this one right here, I started experimenting a little bit more where it's coming like through those trees, through these trees down here, and behind here. I need to go and redo some of the, add some more white ink because this is faded out here, but having these beams come from the background and wind, they're not twisting or anything like that, but they're just kind of hitting some areas and they're going in between your different objects, seemingly from back to front. That is, a phenomenal tool to be able to do in your scenes to create distance between everything, okay? And it just gives so much dimension to a scene. That's why, I don't know, I feel like going into a lot of the scenes that I've already done and adding that. The only problem is, I don't know, it might be overkill to do that over, 90% of the scenes. It would, I don't know, be too much, but would it improve all those scenes? I don't know, it might. So, I don't know, that's this little thing, this little element, this little easy element to do. I don't know, it's going to be hard to not do that all the time. But whether or not it's a bad thing, I don't know. It might in terms of monotony, but it won't be bad in terms of fun. Okay. All right, now I'm going into the scene here and adding kind of this frosty type of element alongside the shoreline here in some areas. I love texture, okay? And one of the things that I've mentioned in other videos in the past was when we're working in stamps, okay, we're going for crisp images, right? When you stamp something out, you don't want it to look blurry at all or something like that, or you don't want it to not stamp out in a certain area. In general, okay, there are certain types of effects that I do with like mistier areas where I'll wipe off, you know, some of the stamp before making my impression, but for the most part, you want crisp impressions, okay? But from a textural standpoint, you know, like clouds here, you know, generally having kind of softer edges to your clouds or something like that, or creating visual texture and variation within a given piece is kind of nice because you vary the surface a little bit, okay? We create range with value. We have darks and lights. We have things near to far. We have sometimes warm and cool, okay? But adding an element of soft to go against crisp and maybe hard, okay, is a nice contrast. And I mean, you can do very little of it, but because of all the other crisp elements within composition, that soft area will really stand out. I mean, and even something like this card right here, okay, this whole tree here is stamped out crisp, right? But what stands out here in terms of the sky are these glowing little stars, right? And that's just from a little bit of pigment dabbed over the top of a white, you know, gel pen dot, okay? So those little crisp elements like that, I mean, you know, these are tiny, these are dots, okay? But I think those really play a key part in kind of the textural statement that you're making in there, okay? All right, so soft clouds, oops, now see, that's way too much. I'm using my wet color box here. That's too much, so you can just wipe it off, oops, like that. And it comes right off, right? I'm always going for kind of the easiest and least precarious processes with everything that I do, okay? Most of the techniques that I do in terms of ease, okay, and that's what I am going for, it happens to be about using less ink, okay? So when I start with my inks, I'm usually starting from light tones, and I'm working darker and darker and darker, okay? The light tones you can pretty much put anywhere, okay? But when you get into the darker tones, just, like I said, remember to blot it off first before you go into your scene so that you're using a drier application of it. And that's the same thing with the color box ink. Kind of start off with drier applications, almost to where when you start tapping it down on your ink, on your scenes, you can't see what you're doing because not enough of it transferred, okay? But see, the more I tap down with this, the more ink applies, right? And if it takes you 15 or 20 taps to get that little bit of translucent ink over the top of it, that's what you want. So it's not a precarious exercise, okay? And you're never going to go like that and say, oh my god, it's just horrible. Because if I do one tapping, almost nothing shows up. So I have to kind of build it up, and it slowly comes into focus as far as what it's going to look like. And that way, what that translates to as far as an application goes is complete control, okay? By yourself, all right? So keep it easy, and I guess don't rush it is the thing, you know? Don't try to get to that tone of blue out there with one color, okay? Build it up slowly, and it won't take too long to do. And you'll achieve right you know, the thing that you want, because it happens in a nice, progressive manner and controlled manner at that. Okay? Anyway, so you can see how soft these clouds are looking right here now. Yeah? The clouds kind of stamped out light and airy anyway, but what I've done was I've gone back in and I've just added some extra kind of softness around them, and in this case, lightness, okay? See, when you look at it kind of arm's distance, it does look a little bit softer, I feel, okay? Anyways, I really like these trees here in the foreground. I didn't used to use so much of that VersaFine, you know, sometimes I forget what media I have. And if you guys are stampers, you know what I'm talking about, so I don't know, you gotta kind of look through things, look through your equipment, you know, your media that you have, and sometimes pull things out and play around with it. Okay, so now those beams are kind of holding fairly well. I thought they might start drying and setting up a little bit. I can still see them pretty well. Nice and airy like that. You know, when you're adding this into a scene too, you're kind of defining light because you're stamping, you know, you're tapping light into darkness, and that becomes a light source in a way, you know, or reflected light, I should say. So if you're adding a little bit of mist here, what you're seeing is that there's moisture in the air and it's reflecting the light coming from whatever light source you're working with. So anyway, okay, so then there's kind of distant light in here, kind of coming into our scene. I think that looks pretty dramatic. I wasn't planning on having this kind of streaking across into the foreground like that, but I thought that looked okay too. And it maybe added a little bit of dimension to our foreground as well, so kind of fun stuff. Does anyone have any questions about any of this? I hope you can still hear me. I'm looking at my live stream health on my browser right here, and it's red. I don't know if that started off as green or what, but I hope this didn't just cut off somewhere. But if there are no questions, and if I am indeed still broadcasting, I hope you enjoyed the card. And as always, as we were saying, drop me a note if you have any questions or would like to see something done in a live stream video or the whatever, the pre-recorded ones that happen. Okay? Thank you, Natalia. Thanks for joining in. And thanks everyone for sitting in and stamping with me. Try those beams out. They are really fun to do. Okay? Light, dry applications. Okay? Thanks again, and signing off.